In the state of New York, close to the Canadian border, there is a little town called Lake Placid. If for any reason you'll find yourself there, you better ask the story of the most cruel battle have ever taken place between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Yes, a battle took place there, and it wasn't cold as the war, even if this battle took place literally on ice. By the way, every single person, no exceptions, will start this story in the same way. In a whisper, it will make you a question. Do you believe in miracles? The year 1979 was running away. In people's mind, there is just the Cold War. The Americans live in fear of a Russian invasion. Even if Christmas is coming, people don't feel safe, and everybody knows that something is going to happen. Something, but what? The mystery was solved that Christmas Eve when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. It may seem obvious, but the United States didn't like it at all. Thus, the whole world held its breath, fearing of a thermonuclear war. The US can't declare war to the Soviet Union, however, they have to reply with strength and determination. So President Jimmy Carter decides for the boycott of the Moscow's Olympic Games, scheduled for that summer. The risk, however, is that the Russians will boycott the Winter Olympics, those organized in February in the United States. Yes, it's the Cold War, and if the Olympic Committee gives to the Russians the Olympic Games, must do the same with the United States to not break that delicate balance that everything led. Summer in Moscow and winter in New York, more specifically in Lake Placid. The Soviet government, however, surprising the whole world, decided to not boycott the competition. Their conviction is that they will win as many medals as they can, and they will do it in their worst enemy's home, proving once and for all the Soviet superiority. Russia is very good in several sports, but there is one in particular in which the Russians are the best in the world: hockey on ice. They are gorgeous basically for two reasons. Firstly, they merely have one of the best teams in the history of the sport. Secondly, the Soviet Union is a communist regime, and this means that officially there are no professional players there. And at that time, the Olympic Games allowed just amateurs. Thus, Russia can bring its major team to the Games. Vice versa, the United States have a professional league, so they must send the college national team to the Games. For this reason, the only goal that the American Hockey Federation has set is to not disfigure. Winning is objectively impossible, but if you have to lose, you must do it with dignity. This is the common idea in the offices of the league. It may seem strange, but not many coaches want to lead the national hockey team at the Olympics. Basically, because nobody wants to put his face into this project. They all agree that that team can't even lose with dignity. The league so arrives at a fairly obvious choice. To lead a team composed by college players, the best choice is a college coach. Thus, the federation picked the best, or at least the most successful coach. His name is Herbert Paul Brooks, and he has been training at Minnesota University for 7 years, winning 3 championships. Some people say that it was Coach Brooks who proposed himself, telling the league he had an idea. He claims that to be able to level the playing field with the Soviets, the Finnish, the Canadians, the US don't need the best players, but the best team he can create. The most compact and most organized team it is possible to form. In short, he'd like to pick the players who will be able to put their heart and blood into the field until the end. Coach Brooks needed around 3 months just to compose his team. To do that, he summons the best player of the University League and put them in a continuous competition, bringing them to exhaustion. His training schedule is inhuman. For 3 months, players train with no breaks, free nights or any kind of fun. Coach Brooks knows that his team won't be the most technical, the most creative, the most solid. However, he knows that they could be the fittest, the most trained. After all, they will certainly be the youngest. And to make it possible, Brooks turns himself into an iron surgeon who trains his boys at any time of day and night. For training, the day is worth as much as the night, and when players have to rest, he makes them study tactics and schemes. The only way a player can rest peacefully is leaving the team or to be discarded. For this reason, Brooks got hated by his boys, who argue among themselves if it is not the case to send everything upstream. However, every time Coach Brooks comes up with one of his typical speeches, a lecture on being man, something patriotic, and no one wants to leave the national team anymore. Outside that locker room, however, nobody believes in those boys. It was made clear by Dave Anderson, reporter at the New York Times. Unless the ice melts, or unless the United States team or another team performs a miracle, as did the American squad in 1960, the Russians are expected to easily win the Olympic gold medal for the 6th time in the last 7 tournaments. And this is the common idea in the United States. It is even impossible to imagine that those guys can even pass the group. They will never win. The Russians are too good in hockey. It is better to try to defeat them in some other sports. This is what the rest of the country thinks of their own boys. And Russians are really the best. They have a dream sextet that boasts players like Vladislav Tretiev, then the best goalkeeper in the world, Boris Mihailov, right wing with a lethal left swing, Alexander Malchev, undisputed star of Dynamo Moscow, and Vyacheslav Fetisov, one of the best defenders in the history of the sport, who later will also become sports minister under Putin's government. In short, on paper, the Soviet Union have the best champions in the world. Players so accustomed to playing together that they do it mechanically. For this reason, the world calls them the Red Machine. To understand why this story is particularly exciting, it is important to understand that if all the Russians are affirmed champions, the Americans oscillate between being losers or half-known. Few of those boys actually seem destined for a professional career. At least their captain, his name is Mike Eruzione, and he is about 20 years old. However, no one remembers the names of the rest of the team, and the various Neil Broughton, Ken Morrow, Mike Ramsey, or Dave Christian are almost unknown. They are considered mediocre and with no future. Even Coach Brooks didn't have a glorious past. He was a college player too, and as his boys, he was summoned to go to the famous Olympics of 1960, the last that the United States won. Yet Brooks, 7 days before the games, without any particular explanation, was rejected by the national team. He was just sent home because of the coach. The coach thought that someone else was just better than him. Thus, no medal, no professional contract, no sponsorship, no money, no future. He had nothing. The rest of his career as a player was limited to a few minor leagues before becoming a coach. No one out of that locker room believes in this team. No one. Sometimes in life, faith acts in mysterious ways, complicating things, ruining works and plans. And that year, even destiny seems to be against that team. Thus, a week after the inaugural ceremony of the Games, the American and the Russian national teams are together in the same place. They are in New York. So someone thinks, hey, we should organize an exhibition match. The idea find the agreement of both governments, and thus, just 3 days before the Olympic debut, the two national teams find themselves face to face on the ice of Madison Square Garden. Brooks' declaration to press, which are often bold and arrogant, have raised curiosity around that team, filling the stands with curious fans. They expect to attend an historical battle between the Soviets and the Americans. Despite everything, the US national team is literally paved by the Russians, with the result of 10-3, a bloody lecture on hockey, just a few days before the beginning of the Olympic Games. Nobody knows what can happen in an athlete's mind after a defeat like that one. To stand again when someone knocked you out, it is not easy at all. The majority of the people just remain on the floor waiting for the end. Sometimes even champions fell down to not get up again. Rise again is something that only few motivated people can do. It is something that only those who are used to suffering, failing and getting up again and again can do. You need to have great motivation and an iron will. And Brooks' kids have been carefully forged. The United States, in fact, with heart and mind, begins the Olympics by drawing with a goal 70 seconds from the end against Sweden, which will win a bronze medal at the end, managing to defeat one of the favorites in the second game, Czechoslovakia. Match after match, victory after victory. The awareness of Coach Brooks' boys grew, and someone around the country begins to convince himself that those kids are not so bad. To protect them from the pressure, Coach Brooks decides that no one of them is allowed to talk to the press. Coach Brooks can be colder than the Cold War itself. Moreover, when the press begin to say that he is an egocentric and a narcissist, because he's the only one that goes to speak with them, Coach Brooks decides that the time has come for his deputy to dedicate himself to journalists. Thus, between press silence and comebacks almost unexpected, the American boys managed to finish second in their group, which means access to the final group. To clarify, the formula is this: 2 groups in which only the first 2 qualify and then face each other in a group for the composition of the final podium. For the United States, having arrived here means having already destroyed every prediction. However, Houston, we have a problem. What's the problem? Russia is the first team the US have to face. And at the moment, Russia has been invictus for 13 months. I like this story because it's about revenge. It talks about a group of guys that no one believed in, that working together and hard managed to overturn every forecast. The evening of the match against Russia, the ABC has the rights to broadcast the match. However, they decided that those guys do not even deserve the live show, even though they are fighting for a medal. The game was thus transmitted in the middle of the night, after other shows, after the match itself. This is why I like this story. Oh, I love this story. Because everyone in life has experienced, directly or indirectly, being told that you are not good enough to do something. You are not strong enough to do something. You are going to fail. And there is a boy in the national team who best embodies this revenge. His name is Jimmy Craig, and his what in the hockey is called goaltender, the goalkeeper. Craig was considered a hockey promise. He was also selected to become a professional. However, his mother, who was gravely ill, asked him to refuse the contract because of the Olympic Games. Her dream was to have the possibility to watch her son wearing the national uniform. Unfortunately, his mother died before the beginning of the Olympics. Then his performance has cracked, and experts started saying that he didn't deserve the Olympic Games. But Coach Brooks knew what his potential was. However, neither the federation nor the newspaper believed that keep playing again was a good idea. They said he was psychologically too fragile, that he couldn't withstand the pressure. Russia has already scored 10 goals to him in the pre-Olympic exhibition. One like him can't play again. In front of the Soviet, he would certainly have crumbled. Yet, Coach Brooks has no doubts. And on February 22nd, 1980, to defend the American goal, he chooses Jimmy Craig, who shows up for that appointment on the playing field with the usual mask that looked like out of a horror movie. When the day of the match came, the stadium is completely full. It seemed destined to explode. The atmosphere is hot and people are singing patriotic American songs as much louder as they can. The joy, however, ended just after a little because a couple of seconds after the beginning of the match, Russians score thanks to a deflected shot. Brooks' boys do not give up. There is still the whole game to play, and with determination and heart, they manage to find the draw. 1-1. However, again, the joy doesn't last long because the Russians score again. The confidence of Brooks' boys stumbles dangerously, and that's when Jimmy Craig decides to show everyone that his nerves are more than solid. He saves every single Soviet invective. He rejects every single disc, managing to restore the confidence to all his teammates. Thus, on the bell, at the last second of the first period, Mark Johnson rectifies in the goal a too short deflection of the Russian goalkeeper Tretiak. The Russians don't believe it. How did they suffer 2 goals in a single period? In the second period, the Soviets are charged and furious. They decided to prove that they are the strongest, they are the best. I want to be honest with you. If that second period is replayed 10 times, I'm sure that every time it would end up with at least a dozen goal difference in favor of the Soviets. But not that night. Because that night, Jimmy Craig is really determined to not let anything pass. And it is only thanks to him if the second of 3 periods ends only 1-0 for the Russians. In the third period, the unexpected happens. First, the usual Mark Johnson, then the captain, Mark Eruzione, score 2 very important goals. I don't think I can tell you what happened next. I believe that to understand it, it is enough to listen to the last seconds of the commentary of the match. The excitement in the voice of Al Michaels, the ABC commentator, explains it better than anything I could say. He knew he was making the countdown to eternity.
McClanahan is there. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Silk. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
2 days later, the United States will defeat Finland 4-2, winning the Olympic gold medal. However, it doesn't matter, because the only important thing was to defeat the Russians. And they did it with a Craig who saved 36 shots out of 39 that night. To be clear, the hockey disc is a few centimeters round, which when hit hard can easily exceed the speed of 100 kilometers per hour. Now I repeat it slowly. Jimmy Craig saved 36 shots out of 39 that night. A performance that is still considered one of the greatest of all sports history. All the players of that team, or almost, became a professional player and then a real legend. Between the almost, there is also Mark Eruzione, who decided to retire, saying that after such an emotion, it would no longer make sense to play hockey. And the next time someone tells you that you are not smart enough, that you can't do something, that others will kill you just if you try to do something, that you don't have nerve, answer him with just one simple question. Do you believe in miracles?